Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Financial Edition. And today we're continuing our reading of The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. And the subtitle is called A Second Look at the Federal Reserve. And the book we're using is the fifth edition. So this book was inspired by fundamentals. I think it's important to understand how our world works. And one of the things that we're deeply entrenched in is the money system. So I thought it's important to understand how money works, where it came from, its history, things of that nature. And I think this book gives a very good overall picture of it. So, anyways, that's why it was inspired. We were inspired to read this book. Now, before we begin, I wanted to just give a quick plug. If you enjoy what we do and you find value in these videos, consider checking out our other book clubs as well. On Mondays, we have our spiritual book clubs on Wednesday, where we read spiritual books. And then Wednesdays, we have our health book club where we read books about health. And we put all our books that we've read as well as the current ones on YouTube. So please check us out there. We have other things on YouTube as well, such as podcasts and other things that we are in the works in terms of what we're doing and will be putting out there next year. So please check us out on YouTube and support us by subscribing and sharing and commenting and all that good stuff. And if you have a book that you want us to read or you want to recommend us to read, I'll leave a link in the description box below. It could be a spiritual book, it could be a health book, it could be a financial book. We love to hear from you and consider the books that you have recommended. Yeah. So we also have a newsletter that we put out for free, a monthly newsletter. So please sign up for that as well and connect with us, follow us in our Bodega Cat world. And if you want to support us further, you can buy me a coffee, leave a donation, or check out our merch. We have new designs coming out every month for both you fur babies, your cats and dogs, as well as humans. So please check us out there. It is on the shop tab on our website. And then lastly, if you are in the Los Angeles area or visiting or living here, please consider joining us in person. We have a healing center that we use technologies based on Nikola Tesla's scalar wave research for holistic healings for both animals, cats and dogs, as well as humans. So check out our website. We have all the information on there about the technology, how it works, and as well as our other services as well. So having said that, let us begin. Today's episode is chapter 24, and this will be part 3. And if you have a book, you could join us, follow us with your book. If not, you can follow us here. And I'm just going to move the camera in a little bit here so you guys can see better. So I can see better. My eyes are not what they used to be. Okay. All right, here we go. Environmentalism, a substitute for war. It is beyond the scope of this study to prove that currently accepted predictions of environmental doom are based on exaggerated and fraudulent, quote, scientific studies. But such proof is easily found if one is willing to look at the raw data and the assumptions upon which the projections are based. More important, however, is the question of why end-of-the-world scenarios based on phony scientific studies or no studies at all are uncritically publicized by the CFR-controlled media, or why radical environmental groups advocating socialist doctrine and anti-business programs are lavishly funded by CFR-dominated foundations, banks, and corporations. the very groups that would appear to have the most to lose. The report from Iron Mountain answers those questions. As the report pointed out, truth is not important in these matters. It's what people can be made to believe that counts. Quote, credibility is the key, not reality. There is just enough truth in the fact of environmental pollution to make predictions of planetary doom in the year 2000 something seem believable. All that is required is media cooperation and repetition. The plan has apparently worked. People of the industrialized nations have been subjected to a barrage of documentaries, dramas, feature films, ballads, poems, bumper stickers, posters, marches, speeches, seminars, conferences, and concerts. The result has been phenomenal. Politicians are now elected to office on platforms consisting of nothing more than an express concern for the environment and a promise to clamp down on those nasty industries. No one questions the damage done to the economy or the nation. It makes no difference when the very planet on which we live is sick and dying. Not one in 1,000 will question that underlying premise. How could it be false? Look at all the movie celebrities and rock stars who have joined the movement. While the followers of the environmental movement are preoccupied with visions of planetary doom, let us see what the leaders are thinking. The first Earth Day was proclaimed on April 22nd, 1970, at a quote, summit meeting in Rio de Janeiro, attended by environmentalists and politicians from all over the world. A publication widely circulated at that meeting was entitled The Environmental Handbook. The main theme of the book was summarized by a quotation from Princeton professor Richard A. Falk, a member of the CFR. Falk wrote that there are four interconnected threats to the planet: wars of mass destruction, overpopulation, pollution, and the depletion of resources. Then he said, quote, the basis of all four problems is the inadequacy of the sovereign states to manage the affairs of mankind in the 20th century, end quote. And that quote was from Garrett DeBell, editor, The Environmental Handbook, New York Ballantine, Friends of the Earth, 1970, page 138. The handbook continued the CFR line by asking these rhetorical questions. Quote, are nation states actually feasible now that they have power to destroy each other in a single afternoon? What price would most people be willing to pay for a more durable kind of human organization? More taxes, giving up national flags, perhaps the sacrifice of some of our hard-won liberties, end quote. And that quote was from IBIT, page 145. In 1989, the CFR-owned Washington Post published an article written by CFR member George Kennan in which he said, quote, we must prepare instead for an age where the great enemy is not the Soviet Union, but the rapid deterioration of our planet as a supporting structure for civilized life, end quote. And that quote was from A Europe Now Free from a Confining Cold War Vision by George Kennan, Washington Post syndication, Sacramento Bee, November 14, 1989, page 87. On March 27, 1990, in the CFR-controlled New York Times, CFR member Michael Oppenheimer wrote, quote, global warming, ozone depletion, deforestation, and overpopulation are the four horsemen of a looming 21st century apocalypse. As the cold world recedes, the environment is becoming the number one international security concern, end quote. And that quote, a footnote on that quote says, the New York Times has been one of the principal means by which CFR policies are inserted into the mainstream of public opinion. The paper was purchased in 1896 by Alfred Ochs. I hope I pronounced that right, with financial backing from CFR pioneer J.P. Morgan, Rothschild agent August Belmont, and Jacob Schiff, a partner in Kuhn Loeb and Company. It is now owned by CFR member Arthur Sulzberger, who is also the publisher, and it is staffed by numerous CFR editors and columnists. See Perloff, page 181. And I believe in 2025, the Washington Post. Oh, sorry, this is talking about the New York Times. Never mind. I was thinking of what's his name? The Amazon CEO owned the Washington Post. But anyways, okay, never mind. Onward, continue. CFR member Lester Brown heads up another think tank called the World Watch Institute. In the Institute's annual report entitled State of the World 1991, Brown said that, quote, the battle to save the planet will replace the battle over ideology as the organizing theme of the New World Order, end quote. New World Order, that's a buzzword, isn't it? And that quote was from Lester R. Brown, The New World Order, in Lester R. Brown et al., State of the World 1991, a World Watch Institute report on progress toward a sustainable society. New York, W. W. Norton, 1991, page 3. In the official publication of the 1992 Earth Summit, we find this, quote, the world community now faces together greater risks to our common security through our impacts on the government than from traditional military conflicts with one another, end quote. How many times does it have to be explained? The environmental movement was created by the CFR. It is a substitute for war that they hope will become the emotional and psychological foundation for world government. Humanity itself is the target. The Club of Rome is a group of global planners who annually release end-of-the-world scenarios based on predictions of overpopulation and famine. Their membership is international, but the American roster includes such well-known CFR members as Jimmy Carter, Harlan Cleveland, Claiborne Pell, and Saul Linowitz. Their solution to overpopulation? A world government to control birth rates and, if necessary, apply euthanasia. That is a gentle word for the deliberate killing of the old, the weak, and of course the uncooperative. Following the same reasoning advanced at Iron Mountain, the Club of Rome has concluded that fear of environmental disaster could be used as a substitute enemy for the purpose of unifying the masses behind its program. In its 1991 book entitled The First Global Revolution, we find this, quote, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself, end quote. And this quote was from Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider, The First Global Revolution, a report by the Council of the Club of Rome, New York Pantheon Books, 1991, page 115. Socialist theoreticians have always been fascinated by the possibility of controlling population growth. It excites their imagination because it is the ultimate bureaucratic plan. A side note, an ultimate control, isn't it? If the real enemy is humanity itself, as the Club of Rome says, then humanity itself must become the target. Fabian socialist Bertrand Russell expressed it thus. Oh, okay, so Bertrand Russell, there is a footnote. C. Martin, page 171, page 325, and page 463 to 469. Okay, so Bertrand Russell said, quote, I do not pretend that birth control is the only way in which population can be kept from increasing. War, as I remarked a moment ago, has hitherto been disappointing in this respect, but perhaps bacteriological war may prove more effective. If a Black Death could be spread throughout the world once in every generation, survivors could procreate freely without making the world too full. A scientific world society cannot be stable unless there is a world government. It will be necessary to find ways of preventing an increase in world population. If this is to be done otherwise than by wars, pestilences, and famines, it will demand a powerful international authority. This authority should deal out the world's food to the various nations in proportion to their population at the time of the establishments of the authority. If any nation subsequently increase its population, it should not on that account receive any more food. The motive for not increasing population would therefore be very compelling. End quote. And that quote was from Bertrand Arthur William Russell, The Impact of Science on Society. New York, Simon and Schuster, 1953, page 103 to 104 and 111. Very compelling indeed. These quiet-spoken collectivists are not kidding around. For example, one of the most visible environmentalists, an advocate of the population control, is Jacques Cousteau. Interviewed by the United Nations UNESCO courier in November of 1991, Cousteau spelled it out. He said, quote, what should we do to eliminate suffering and disease? It is a wonderful idea, but perhaps not altogether a beneficial one in the long run. If we try to implement it, we may jeopardize the future of our species. It's terrible to have to say this. World population must be stabilized, and to do that, we must eliminate 350,000 people per day. This is so horrible to contemplate that we shouldn't even say it, but it is just as bad not to say it. End quote. Wow. Interviewed by Bhagat Aludi and Adele Rifat. Sorry, I butchered those names. Courier de UNESCO, November 1991, page 13. Gorbachev becomes an ecology warrior. We can now understand how Mikhail Gorbachev, formerly the leader of one of the most repressive governments the world has known, became head of a new organization called the International Green Cross, which supposedly is dedicated to environmental issues. Gorbachev has never denounced collectivism, only the label of a particular brand of collectivism called communism. His real interest is not ecology, but world government, with himself assured a major position in the power structure. In a public appearance on Fulton, Missouri, he praised the Club of Rome, of which he is a member, for its position on population control. Then he said, quote, one of the worst of the new dangers in one of the worst of the new dangers is ecological. Today, global climatic shifts, the greenhouse effect, the ozone hole, acid rain, contamination of the atmosphere, soil and water by industrial and household waste, the destruction of the forests, etc., all threaten the stability of the planet. End quote. And that quote was from Mikhail Gorbachev, The River of Time and the Necessity of Action, 46th John Finley Green Foundation Lecture, Westminster College, Fulton, Missouri, May 6, 1992, transcript from Westminster College Department of Press Relations, page 6. Gorbachev proclaimed that global government was the answer to these threats and that the use of government force was essential. He said, quote, I believe that the New World Order will not be fully realized until the United Nations and its Security Council create structures authorized to impose sanctions and make use of other measures of compulsion. End quote. And that quote was from IBIT, page 9. Here is an arch criminal who fought his way up through the ranks of the Soviet Communist Party, became the protege of Yuri Andropov, head of the dreaded KGB, was a member of the USSR's ruling Politburo throughout the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and who was selected by the Politburo in 1985 as the supreme leader of world communism. All of this was during one of the Soviets' most dismal periods of human rights violations and subversive activities against the free world. Furthermore, he ruled over a nation with one of the worst possible records of environmental destruction. At no time while he was in power did he ever say or do anything to show concern over planet Earth. All that is now forgotten. Gorbachev has been transformed by the CFR-dominated media into an ecology warrior. He is calling for world government and telling us that such a government will use environmental issues as justification for sanctions and other, quote, measures of compulsion. We cannot say that we were not warned. U.S. branded as ecological aggressor. The use of compulsion is an important point in these plans. People in the industrialized nations are not expected to cooperate in their own demise. They will have to be forced. They will not like it when their food is taken for global distribution. They will not approve when they are taxed by a world authority to finance foreign political projects. They will not voluntarily give up their cars or resettle into smaller houses or communal barracks to satisfy the resource allocation quotas of an UN agency. Club of Rome member Maurice Strong states the problem. Quote, in effect, the United States is committing environmental aggression against the rest of the world. At the military level, the United States is the custodian. At the environmental level, the United States is clearly the greatest risk. One of the worst problems in the United States is energy prices. They're too low. It is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, ownership of motor vehicles, numerous electric household appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, expansive suburban housing are not sustainable, end quote. Excuse me. And that quote was from Ecology Remedy Costly, AP. I think that means Associated Press. Sacramento Bee, March 12, 1992, page A8. Also, Maurice Strong, Introduction to Jim McNeil, Peter Winsemius, and Teizo Yakushiji, Beyond Independence, New York, Oxford University Press, 1991, page 9. Mr. Strong's remarks were enthusiastically received by world environmental leaders, but they prompted this angry editorial response in the Arizona Republic. Quote, translated from EcoSpeak, this means two things. Number one, a reduction in the standard of living in Western nations through massive new taxes and regulations. And number two, a wholesale transfer of wealth from industrialized to underdeveloped countries. The dubious premise here is that if the U.S. economy could be reduced to, say, the size of Malaysia's, the world would be a better place. Most Americans probably would balk at the idea of the UN banning automobiles in the U.S. End quote. And that quote was from Road to Ruin, Arizona Republic, March 26, 1992. Who is this Maurice Strong who sees the United States as the environmental aggressor against the world? Does he live in poverty? Does he come from a backward country that is resentful of American prosperity? Does he himself live in modest circumstances? Avoiding consumption in order to preserve our natural resources? None of the above. He is one of the richest men or wealthiest men in the world. He lives and travels in great comfort. He is a lavish entertainer. In addition to having great personal wealth derived from the oil industry in Canada, which he helped nationalize, Maurice Strong was the Secretary General of the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio, head of the 1972 UN Conference on Human Environment in Stockholm, the first Secretary General of the UN Environment Program, President of the World Federation of United Nations, co-chairman of the World Economic Forum, member of the Club of Rome, trustee of the Aspen Institute, and a director of the World Future Society. That is probably more than you wanted to know about this man, but it is necessary in order to appreciate the importance of what follows. A plot for economic crises. Maurice Strong believes, or says that he believes, the world's ecosystems can be preserved only if the affluent nations of the world can be disciplined into lowering their standard of living. Production and consumption must be curtailed. To bring that about, those nations must submit to rationing, taxation, and political domination by world government. They will probably not do that voluntarily, he says, so they will have to be forced. To accomplish that, it will be necessary to engineer a global monetary crisis which will destroy their economic systems. Then they will have no choice but to accept assistance and control from the UN. This strategy was revealed in the May 1990 issue of West magazine, published in Canada in an article entitled, quote, The Wizard of Baca Grande. Journalist Daniel Wood described his week-long experience at Strong's private ranch in southern Colorado. This ranch has been visited by such CFR notables as David Rockefeller, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, founder of the World Bank Robert McNamara, and the presidents of such organizations as IBM, Pan Am, and Harvard. During Wood's stay at the ranch, the tycoon talked freely about environmentalism and politics. To express his own worldview, he said he was planning to write a novel about a group of world leaders who decided to save the planet. As the plot unfolded, it became obvious that it was based on real people and real events. Wood continues his story, or continues this story. Quote, each year he explains as background to the telling of the novel's plot, the World Economic Forum convenes in Davos, Switzerland. Over 1,000 CEOs, prime ministers, finance ministers, and leading academics gather in February to attend meetings and set economic agendas for the year ahead. With this as a setting, he then says, quote, what if a small group of these world leaders were to conclude that the principal risk to the earth comes from the actions of the rich countries? And if the world is to survive, those rich countries would have to sign an agreement reducing their impact on the environment. Will they do it? The group's conclusion is no. The rich countries won't do it. They won't change. So in order to save the planet, the group decides, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized nations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? End quote. Continuing with the big quote. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Okay, never mind. This group of world leaders, it's too confusing. This group of world leaders, he continues, form a secret society to bring about an economic collapse. It's February. They're all at Davos. These aren't terrorists. They're world leaders. They have positioned themselves in the world's commodity and stock markets. They've engineered, using their access to stock exchanges and computers and gold supplies, a panic. When they prevent the world stock markets from closing, then they prevent the world stock markets from closing. They jam the gears. They hire mercenaries to hold the rest of the world leaders at Davos as hostages. The markets can't close. The rich countries, ... And Strong makes a slight motion with his fingers as if he were flicking a cigarette butt out of the window. I sit there spellbound. This is not any storyteller talking. This is Maurice Strong. He knows these world leaders. He is, in fact, co-chairman of the Council of the World Economic Forum. He sits at the fulcrum of power. He is in a position to do it. I probably shouldn't be saying things like this, he says. End quote. And this quote was from The Wizard of Bacca Grande by Daniel Wood, West Magazine, May 1990, page 35. Maurice Strong's fanciful plot probably shouldn't be taken too seriously, at least in terms of a literal reading of future events. It is unlikely they will unfold in exactly that manner, although it is not impossible. For one thing, it would not be necessary to hold the leaders of the industrialized nations at gunpoint. They would be the ones engineering this plot. Leaders from third world countries do not have the means to cause a global crisis. That would have to come from the money centers in New York, London, or Tokyo. Furthermore, the masterminds behind this thrust for global government have always resided in the industrialized nations. They have come from the ranks of the CFR in America and from other branches of the International Roundtable in England, France, Belgium, Canada, Japan, and elsewhere. They are the ideological descendants of Cecil Rhodes, and they are fulfilling his dreams. It is not important whether or not Maurice Strong's plot for global economic collapse is to be taken literally. What is important is that men like him are thinking along those lines. As Wood pointed out, they are in a position to do it, or something like it. If it is not this scenario, they will consider another one with similar consequences. If history has proven anything, it is that men with financial and political power are quite capable of heinous plots against their fellow men. They have launched wars, caused depressions, and created famines to suit their personal agendas. We have little reason to believe that the world leaders of today are more saintly than their predecessors. Furthermore, we must not be fooled by pretended concern for Mother Earth. The call to arms for saving the planet is a gigantic ruse. There is just enough truth to environmental pollution to make the show credible, as the report from Iron Mountain phrased it. But the end of Earth scenarios which drive the movement forward are bogus. The real objective in all of this is world government, the ultimate doomsday mechanism from which there can be no escape. Destruction of the economic strength of the industrialized nations is merely a necessary prerequisite for ensnaring them into the global web. The thrust of the current ecology movement is directed totally to that end. Summary: the United States government is mired in a $5.8 trillion debt. By 2001, interest payments on that debt were running $360 billion per year. That consumes about 19% of all federal revenue and costs the average family over $5,000 each year. Nothing is purchased by it. It merely pays interest. It represents the government's largest single expense. Interest on the national debt is already consuming more than 36% of all the revenue collected from personal income taxes. If the long-term trend continues, there is nothing to prevent it from eventually consuming all of it. By 1992, there were more people working for government than for manufacturing companies in the private sector. There are more citizens receiving government checks than there are paying income taxes. When it is possible for people to vote on issues involving the transfer of wealth to themselves from others, the ballot box becomes a weapon whereby the majority plunders the minority. That is the point of no return. It is a doomsday mechanism. By 1992, more than half of all federal outlays went for what are called entitlements. Here is another doomsday mechanism. Entitlements are expenses, such as Social Security and Medicare, which are based on promises of future payments. Entitlements represent 52% of federal outlays. When this is added to the 14% that is now being spent for interest payments on the national debt, we come to the startling conclusion that 2/3 of all federal expenses are now entirely automatic, and that percentage is growing each month. The biggest doomsday mechanism of all is the Federal Reserve System. Every cent of our money supply came into being for the purpose of being loaned to someone. Those dollars will disappear when the loans are paid back. If we tried to pay off the national debt, our money supply would be undermined. Under the Federal Reserve System, therefore, Congress would be fearful to eliminate the national debt, even if it wanted to. Political environmentalism has caused millions of acres of timber and agricultural land to be taken out of production. Heavy industry has been chased from our shores by our own government. High taxes, rules beyond reason for safety devices in the workplace, so-called fair employment practices, and mandatory health insurance are rapidly destroying what is left of the private sector. The result is unemployment and dislocation for millions of American workers. Government moves in to fill the void it creates, and bureaucracy grows by the hour. Federal taxes now take more than 40% of our private incomes. State, county, and local taxes are on top of that. Inflation feeds on what is left. We spend half of each year working for the government. Real wages in America have declined. Young couples with a single income have a lower standard of living than their parents did. The net worth of the average household is falling. The amount of leisure time is shrinking. The percentage of Americans who own their homes is dropping. The age at which a family acquires a first home is rising. The number of families counted among the middle class is falling. The number of people living below the officially defined poverty level is rising. More and more Americans are broke at age 65. None of this is accidental. It is the fulfillment of a plan by members of the CFR who comprise the hidden government of the United States. Their goal is the deliberate weakening of the industrialized nations as a prerequisite to bringing them into a world government built upon the principles of socialism with themselves in control. The origin of many of the stratagems in this plan can be traced to a government-sponsored think tank study released in 1966 called The Report from Iron Mountain. The purpose of the study was to analyze methods by which a government can perpetuate itself in power, ways to control its citizens and prevent them from rebelling. The conclusion of the report was that in the past, war has been the only reliable means to achieve that goal. Under world government, however, war technically would be impossible. So the main purpose of the study was to explore other methods for controlling populations and keeping them loyal to their leaders. It was concluded that a suitable substitute for war would require a new enemy, which posed a frightful threat to survival. Neither the threat nor the enemy had to be real. They merely had to be believable. Several surrogates for war were considered, but the only one holding real promise was the environmental pollution model. This was viewed as the most likely to succeed because, one, it could be related to observable conditions such as smog and water pollution. In other words, it would be based partly on fact and therefore believable. And two, predictions could be made showing end of earth scenarios just as terrible or just as horrible as atomic warfare. Accuracy in these predictions would not be important. Their purpose would not be to frighten. Their purpose would be to frighten, not to inform. While the followers of the current environmental movement are preoccupied with visions of planetary doom, the leaders have an entirely different agenda. It is world government. End of chapter 24. Wow. Pretty sinister, isn't it? You can argue that these leaders are pretty psychotic. They're like sociopaths. Ooh, that's pretty scary. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope we'll see you next time for another chapter, another week. In the meantime, I hope you guys all have a great day. Great evening, great afternoon, wherever you guys are. Okay, bye-bye now.